The Cleveland Browns are sitting at pick 6, but that pick might not even belong to them for long. Multiple NFL insiders are now circling the same idea. This isn't just draft speculation anymore, it's turning into a full-blown trade-down storm that could reshape the entire 2026 NFL draft order. And what happens next might already be set in motion behind closed doors. The Cleveland Browns are sitting on one of the most dangerous positions in the entire 2026 NFL draft, pick number 6. On paper, that sounds like control, that sounds like power, but behind the scenes, insiders are starting to ask a very different question: what if the Browns don't actually stay there? Because right now, this isn't just random speculation anymore. It's not just one analyst throwing out a bold prediction. Multiple NFL sources are now circling the same idea from different angles, and when that starts happening, it usually means something is already moving in silence. ESPN's Matt Miller has already pointed out how last year's draft rumors around the Browns didn't just stay rumors. They escalated, they spread, and eventually, they turned into real draft night action that nobody fully saw coming until it was already happening. And now, the exact same pattern is starting to form again. The difference this time is the volume. More insiders, more team connections, more what-if scenarios involving aggressive trade-up teams sitting just outside the top 5. Suddenly, the Dallas Cowboys are being repeatedly linked as a team ready to make a massive jump. The New York Jets are also being pulled into the conversation, armed with multiple first-round picks and aggressive roster needs that could force a move. And that's where things start to get uncomfortable for Cleveland fans, because when 2 or 3 separate teams are all mentioned as potential trade-up candidates into the exact same range, it usually doesn't mean nothing is happening. It means something is already being discussed that fans haven't seen yet. Even more interesting, reports around draft targets like Arvell, Reese, Jeremiah Love, and other elite prospects are quietly shaping this entire situation. Because this isn't just about trading down for value, it's about whether a team at pick 6 can resist a massive offer when a franchise-altering player is still on the board. And history tells us something important here: when the Browns are at the center of draft chaos, it rarely stays predictable for long. So the real question isn't whether rumors exist anymore. It's whether Cleveland is about to relive the same draft night shock all over again, but this time with even higher stakes, bigger offers, and teams ready to pay anything to move into their spot. Because if last year taught us anything, the real move doesn't happen in the headlines, it happens right before the pick is announced. Everything in this 2026 NFL draft rumor mill keeps circling back to just 2 teams, and once you see the pattern, it becomes hard to ignore. On one side, you have the Dallas Cowboys, a franchise that isn't just thinking about the draft, they're thinking about urgency. This isn't a rebuilding roster. This is a win-now team that already has offensive firepower but keeps getting exposed when it matters most. The message from inside the building is simple: fix the defense or nothing else matters. And that mindset changes everything about how they approach pick value. Because when a team believes it is 1 or 2 defensive stars away from a Super Bowl push, draft capital stops being a luxury and starts becoming a weapon. That's why multiple reports keep tying Dallas to aggressive trade-up behavior. They're not just watching the board, they're studying exactly who might slip into range. And if their target is there at pick 6, they won't hesitate to move. Then there's the New York Jets, a team that adds a completely different kind of pressure to this situation. Unlike Dallas, this isn't just about one missing piece. This is about maximizing a rare situation where they actually hold multiple first-round picks and real flexibility. That kind of draft capital doesn't sit still in the modern NFL. And here, where things get interesting, because the Jets aren't just being linked to defensive help. Reports suggest they're also exploring elite offensive weapons, players they believe could completely change their identity overnight. When a team starts debating between staying put and jumping into the top 6 for a game-changing talent, every team around them feels it. Now combine both situations, Dallas pushing to win immediately and the Jets holding leverage with multiple picks, and suddenly the entire top 10 starts to feel unstable. Because if either of these teams makes a move, it forces the Browns into a decision they can't easily undo. And that's why Cleveland is suddenly the center of attention. Not because they planned it, but because 2 aggressive franchises are staring directly at their spot like it's the key to unlocking their entire draft strategy. But the real question is, which one moves first and who blinks under pressure? At first, this all sounded like normal pre-draft noise, the kind of speculation that happens every year around the top 10. But now something has changed. The tone of the reports has shifted, the language has gotten more specific, and most importantly, multiple NFL insiders are no longer just suggesting possibilities, they're starting to describe scenarios that sound already in motion. That's where things get dangerous for the Cleveland Browns at pick 6. Because Albert Breer has now added another layer to this entire situation, reporting that multiple teams picking behind the Jets are actively exploring trade-down options. That includes names like the Cardinals, Giants, Titans, Commanders, and the Browns themselves. That detail matters more than it looks, because it suggests this isn't just about one team trying to move up. It's about an entire section of the draft board quietly preparing for movement. When multiple teams are open to moving down, it usually means one thing: they're expecting offers, not hopping for them, expecting them. And then comes the part that really escalates everything. Browns GM Andrew Berry himself added fuel to the fire with a carefully worded but extremely revealing statement. "I don't know that we'll be picking 6 at the end of April." That's not confirmation of a trade, but it's also not something a front office says unless discussions, scenarios, or at least internal evaluations are already being taken seriously. At the same time, Ian Rappaport has pushed the Cowboys' angle even further, suggesting that Dallas is not just interested, but potentially positioned to act. Not in theory, not as a long shot, but as a legitimate frontrunner if the board breaks the right way. Now combine all of that together: multiple teams open to moving, a GM leaving the door wide open, and insiders independently pointing toward the same aggressive buyer. And suddenly this stops feeling like speculation. It starts feeling like preparation. Because when enough voices start describing the same outcome from different angles, it usually means the league is already quietly aligning toward it behind closed doors. But here's the part nobody can answer yet. Is this just draft smoke, or the early blueprint of a blockbuster that's already been agreed on in principle? And that uncertainty is exactly what makes pick 6 in Cleveland one of the most volatile spots in the entire draft right now. At the center of all this noise around the Cleveland Browns and the potential trade down at pick 6, there's one detail that keeps getting overlooked. This isn't just about teams wanting to move up. It's about who they're moving up for. Because the entire urgency behind this draft buzz is being driven by a small group of elite prospects who are quietly shaping the top 10 before the draft even begins. And depending on how the board falls, one name slipping even a single spot could trigger a chain reaction no one is fully ready for. One of those names is Arvell Reese, a defensive playmaker with the kind of versatility front offices obsess over. Edge rusher, linebacker hybrid, mismatch weapon, the type of player who doesn't just fill a role but changes how an entire defense operates. And in a league where defensive pressure defines playoff football, players like this don't wait long on draft night. Then there's Jeremiah Love, widely viewed as one of the most explosive offensive talents in the class. The kind of player who doesn't need 20 touches to change a game, just one gap, one lane, one moment. And when prospects like that exist near the top of the board, teams with multiple first-round picks start asking a very dangerous question: why wait? That's exactly why teams like the Dallas Cowboys and others are being linked so heavily to aggressive trade-up scenarios. It's not just about improving their roster. It's about making sure someone else doesn't get the player they've already mentally circled. Even names like Carnell Tate are being pulled into the conversation, offensive weapons who could quietly shift the balance of power for a franchise overnight. And when multiple players across multiple positions are generating trade-up interest at the same time, the market doesn't stay stable for long. Because here's what makes this situation different. It's not one can't-miss prospect driving chaos. It's several. And that means every time the draft board shifts, even slightly, the ripple effect hits multiple teams at once. One pick at the top doesn't just change one franchise's plans, it can completely rewrite the strategy for teams sitting at 6, 7, 8, and beyond. So when insiders say teams are watching closely, what they really mean is this. They're waiting for the exact moment one of these players starts to slip, because that's when the phone calls don't just begin. They explode. At this point, the rumors around the Cleveland Browns at pick 6 aren't just staying in insider reports anymore, they're starting to turn into full-blown trade scenarios that fans are actively debating like they're already real. And the moment that really sent shockwaves through the draft community was a mock trade idea from Dane Brugler that didn't just feel possible, it felt calculated. In that scenario, the Dallas Cowboys don't sit back and hope a defensive star falls. They move aggressively. They package their first-round picks, including 12 and 20, and jump straight into pick 6 territory. That alone would already change the entire structure of the top 10. But what makes this idea explode online is what it represents, not just the numbers. It represents a franchise saying, "We are not waiting anymore." Because Dallas isn't operating like a rebuilding team. They're operating like a team that believes their offense is already good enough to win right now, and their defense is the only thing standing between them and a championship push. And when a team reaches that conclusion, draft capital becomes expendable in a way it normally is. On the other side of the deal, Cleveland suddenly finds itself in a position few teams ever experience. Instead of sitting at 6 and making one selection, they're potentially starring at multiple first-round picks stacked across the board. Picks 12, 20, and even additional capital thrown into the conversation in some versions of the scenario. And that's where the real tension begins. Because now this isn't about choosing one superstar. It becomes about choosing 3 impact players versus 1 elite prospect. Stay at 6 and you secure a top-tier talent who could change a franchise instantly. But trade down and you open the door to reshaping your entire roster in one night, speeding up a rebuild in a way most teams can only dream about. That's why this mock trade didn't just circulate, it detonated across NFL circles. Because it forced everyone to ask the same uncomfortable question. Is the true value at pick 6 the player you select? Or the empire you could build by moving out of it? Everything now comes down to one brutal decision sitting right in front of the Cleveland Browns, and there is no middle ground anymore. Pick 6 has turned into a pressure point that could define the entire direction of the franchise. On one side, you stay, you lock in at 6 and trust your board. You take a blue-chip prospect, someone who walks into the building and immediately becomes a foundational piece. A player you can build around, develop, and point to as part of your long-term identity. No chaos, no risk of losing value, just pure talent acquisition at a premium slot. But the problem is, staying is no longer the simple option it used to be. Because now, every major insider conversation around this pick is tied to movement. The idea of staying put almost feels like going against the current of the entire league conversation. And when the entire draft ecosystem starts leaning toward one outcome, standing still becomes the risk instead of the safe play. On the other side, you sell. You step back from pick 6 and accept the kind of offer that only comes around when multiple desperate teams are fighting for the same elite talent. A scenario where a team like the Dallas Cowboys could potentially come calling with multiple first-round picks, changing your entire draft board in one phone call. And that's where things get uncomfortable, because now you're not just talking about one pick anymore. You're talking about 3 potential first-round selections, 3 chances to reshape your roster, 3 swings at filling multiple needs instead of betting everything on one name at the top. But there's a catch. Because every time you trade out of a premium pick, you also give up certainty, you give up control, you give up the chance to take the exact player you want when you want them, without relying on anyone else's decisions. And that's why this decision is tearing through the NFL world right now. Not because it's complicated, but because both paths make sense. Stay and you bet on elite certainty. Trade and you bet on maximum value. So the real question isn't what the Browns should do. It's what they're willing to risk when the phone finally rings on draft night and the entire future of the franchise is sitting on the other end of the line.